Hello and welcome to a Classic Car Weekly exclusive. We are taking you behind the scenes of the Practical Classic Car and Restoration Show at the NEC. I'm Jesse Billington, the staff writer on the paper, and I'm joined today by David Simister, the editor of the title, and we're going to go behind the scenes while the show is setting up and bring you some of the highlights we've already discovered at what is lining up to be a very spectacular show. So if you haven't got your tickets already, be sure to get some and get down here Friday, Saturday and Sunday at the NEC. Okay, we'll start our preliminary adventure off here in Hall 5, and pretty much immediately as you walk in, you're greeted by something very special indeed. It's a 1993 BMW 850 CSI, and well, this is quite a special car, isn't it, David?
Absolutely. So the gate guardians are a really important part of the show. You'll see them as you're walking in, and they're always something quite special. And this particular BMW, visitors to the Classic Motor Show last November might remember it. It was the winner of the flagship Pride of Ownership competition. So this was the one that you, the readers of Classic Car Weekly and the general public, you voted for this as by far your favourite. And I can see why. It is an absolutely stunning example. It's been really well maintained by the owner. It's very much a labour of love, and I think, before you go into and look around all the clubs in Hall 5, just take a moment to have a look around this, because the attention to detail on this is breathtaking.
It is a really special car, and I completely forgot they did a very small amount of 850s with a manual gearbox as well, so that really sets it apart from the Crown, as well as its absolutely spectacular finish. So a perfect, as you said, gate guardian to enter the show with. We'll head on into the rest of Hall 5 and we'll unearth some additional little treats for you to look out for through the weekend. So, David, why should people come along to the Resto Show? What makes it different to all the other big shows and events that we get in the classic world?
Because it's a really big celebration of not only the joys of restoring classic cars, but also the fun of finding a car in an undiscovered barn find condition. There are some absolutely fantastic unrestored cars here, and also about seeing the cars when they've been restored. I mean, some of the stories that the enthusiasts have been through, sometimes over many years to get the cars here to the NEC, is really inspiring, and it's also a really good place to pick up top tips. There are lots of different owners clubs here, so if you've got a car that you need to restore or you're thinking about buying one, this is the place to come. The experts are here and they're going to be able to share their top tips and expertise with you.
And a great example of that is the car we're stood in front of at the moment, actually. We're on the FBHVC stand, Federation of British Historic Vehicle Clubs, and they've got this very nice looking Morris Minor 1000. Why have you dragged me over to this one? What stood out to you with this car?
So this actually is a very important part of classic car ownership and the future of our hobby, and this is all about the environmental impact of classic cars. So you may or may not have heard of a company called Trevi. They specialise in carbon offsetting, and what they do, you basically drive around in your classic car, you can pay some money, they will work out your car's carbon impact, and what you do is you pay them some money, they will go away and plant some trees for you, and that, hey-ho, you've got some carbon neutral motoring. And the reason why I brought you over to this one is this particular 1968 Morris 1000 Saloon. This is the very car that inspired that project. So Tom Worthington, he's a real expert on the subject. It was how he thought about how we could make Myrtle Morris Minor a carbon neutral classic car that actually started that. So again, really fascinating insight into the future of classic motoring. So come over, have a chat with Tom, and he'll be able to give you the full lowdown on that.
So not only is restoring classic cars a great form of recycling in one way, we're now taking it that step further and making it less environmentally impactful than it really could be. So it's a great step forward for the future of classic motoring. We'll shuffle on. There's some more gems to be found here in Hall 5. Okay, we're over at the Morgan Sports Car Club stand, and they've got a very nice collection coming together, but there's two cars at essentially the front of it that are a little bit downbeat and shabby, and there's good reason to that, isn't there?
Yeah, these are definitely pressing my barn find buttons. So first one is a 1948 Flatrad Morgan 44. It looks absolutely gorgeous. Got all the right, sufficient amount of barn find dust on it. And this one has been off the road for 55 years. So again, there's all sorts. I always have a little sort of internal barn find on this. So how long has the car been off the road for? And so far, the record for this year shows 55 years. Last road tax recorded in 19 1968, and the great thing is that the owner is looking to restore this car after the show. I'm really looking forward to seeing this back at the NEC in future as a fully restored, lovely, fully functioning Morgan. The second one is one that actually I'm very familiar with. This was my car of the show from last year's show in Classic Car Weekly, and this is the very 1952 car that actually appeared at that year's Earl's Court Motor Show. Really significant piece of Morgan history. It doesn't look much different to how it appeared last year, but the difference is now is that it's up and running. The drive to the NEC for this year's show is the longest journey that this car has undertaken in many decades. So a really good piece of work from the owner there, and a really significant piece of Malvern history, so make sure you take a moment to come and have a look at it tomorrow. So we're at the Midget and Sprite Club in Hall 5, and there's one particular car that's very familiar to me. This is a yellow Midget 1500 AHL 208T, if we've got any number plate fetishists among us. And this car's very familiar because it's our MG Midget. Jesse, it's been yours for a year and a half now?
Just over a year, really. I picked it up tail end of January last year, and it's been a regular in Classic Car Weekly ever since then, with its many foibles and problems.
And what's it doing here?
Well, it's here for a bit of restoration work, a bit of fettling, a bit of upgrading, a little bit of everything, really. I've been meaning, as people will know if they've read the paper, to sort out a very bad driveline shunt for a while, and I've traced it back to what I think is going to be thrust washers. So I've got all the parts, I've got it up on ramps at the moment, ready to go as soon as the show opens on Friday, and hopefully by the end of the weekend we'll have had that major problem sorted.
And when can readers find out about what happens to it?
Well, it will be out in the issue that immediately follows the restoration show. So that'll be the 27th of March issue. Pick it up on newsstands, get it through your letterbox, and you'll find out if I've actually fixed the problem and if I'm able to also sort out some rather woeful front brakes. But all still to be discovered. But otherwise, do pop by the stand and see how I'm getting on. Probably not very well.
Keep my fingers crossed for you.
Now, we're down the far end of Hall 5, and why am I looking at a van?
Well, that's the thing, is it, a van? It's something I've never seen before. This is a Ford Fiesta Courier, the Fiesta-based van, with the front end of a Ford Puma, the famous sort of 2+2 of the 90s. This is on the racingpuma.co.uk stand, and it's one of the weirdest classics I've seen at the show, and it's going to be very opinion splitting, but do you know what? I absolutely love it. You know, if it's fired up if it fires at one enthusiast, then it's worth doing.
There's already work underway on another very nice looking white Puma down the far end, but this van it's certainly caught my eye, and it's likely going to catch yours, so worth having a look around and finding out the story behind this very unusual looking sports car, if you can still call it that.
Sports van.
Sports van, there we go, there's an idea. It's the Ford Puma sports van. We're up at the far end of Hall 5, right up by the Practical Classics World and their live stage, and we've found a rather tidy and now becoming very shiny Morris Marina Coupe, and the man that is currently shining it, the editor of Practical Classics, Danny Hopkins. You looking forward to this weekend?
I am. I'm slightly frazzled at the moment because I've got about 15 things to do at the same time. I can't quite work out which one to start with. So I'm just polishing my car because it's all I'm really capable of at the moment.
So the only thing that's sort of coming to the front of mind is just make a car shiny.
Make a car shiny, and then eat some cake. I've just been given some cake.
Yeah.
It's a bit like Test Match Special Practical Classics. People come and give us cake. So Annie, thank you very much for my banana cake, which I'm going to eat probably all in one.
Someone needs to bring cake down to the Classic Car Weekly sort of area. No one brings us cake. Why is that?
Well, we're weekly journalists. We're running around. You know, we don't get a chance to eat cake, unfortunately.
Too busy for cake.
I just obviously look like I need feeding up. That's what it is.
That is the other half of it. A good slap-up meal.
Indeed.
So what's the thing you're most looking forward to this weekend?
Getting through it with Sunday night. No, I think the most important thing is the people that come. I always look forward to NEC weekends because you get such a huge cross-section of the classic car community coming into one place at one time. And it's a great litmus test for how we're doing at the moment. It's a really important look at how we're doing in terms of the diverse nature of who comes along. And the youth equation is so important. I think this is one of the shows they really come to. And what cars they're into as well, because you know the classic world is always moving. What's considered a classic or a modern classic is always being pushed forward. So actually, these cars, I mean, the Practical Classics stand itself is a really brilliant example of the broad church that we are. So we've got Matt's Austin 7 Special, We've got my Morris Marina, we've got James's Smart Roadster, and we've got Matt George's E36, all of which are starred in the magazine, and all of which are equally loved by the different tribes that read it. So I want to meet the tribes, I want to meet our readers, and I want to hear what they have to say, and I really want to know what they want to see next. It's a great bit of market research, this place, it really is. If they hate it as well, I'm not going to let them have any cake for a start.
It's a great way to find out what's actually going on in the classics world. And like you said, the diversity is fantastic. In the far corner we've just come from, there's the Polski Fiat stand right next to the Jowett stand. So you've got these two sort of polar opposites of the world of classic cars. It is wonderful.
Yeah, massively diverse. I mean, there's everything here from, we saw very early sort of cars that are eligible for the London to Brighton Veteran Car Run, right through to the very latest modern classics. So you get a real cross section of the classic car hobby, and the different things that people do in and with them as well.
We're right up in the middle of Hall 5 now, and we're under the Lancaster Insurance Pride of Ownership banner, and we are surrounded by some absolutely wonderfully shined classics. And the one that's really taken our fancy is a 1964 Daimler, David.
Yes, this is an SP250 owned by Leslie Finlay, and this one, again, there's so many cars with compelling stories here at the show, and this particular one has been in her family for more than 50 years. And it's her father bought it back in 1973. She remembers it as a child, and it clearly has been doted on for decade upon decade. So again, it's one of the nicest examples that I've seen. It's got some very stiff competition here. There's one of the nicest Mark 1 Golfs that I've ever seen, a couple of cars back. There's a very nice 1972 TR6 parked up next to it, and also catching my eye over in the corner over there is a rather lovely Austin A35. So the great thing with the Pride of Ownership contest is that you as the public can vote for these cars. Nobody here, none of the judges, none of the celebrities, it's not their choice, this is your choice. So come along, vote for your favourites, and I'm really looking forward on Sunday to seeing who the winner is.
We're going to take a brief detour to talk about a modern car that's actually on one of the stands. It's just down from where my yellow midget is, and it's an MG that's not quite so dinky. It's the new Simister, and well, it's quite striking, isn't it?
Yeah, do you know what? I've seen this at a couple of different shows now, and every time I see it, my opinion shifts slightly. I remember the first time I saw this, which was at the MG Triumph 100 event last summer. I remember going in, they had a hall where it was stashed away all, and it's like, I remember my first impression of it was, bloody hell, that's huge. When you compare it to things like the MGB and the MGF, and even something like the MG SVR, which was the last two-seater performance MG, it just looks so much bigger than they are, and I think that's more a reflection of the growth of cars compared to the what we were driving 20 or 30 years ago. But I find that it's a very colour sensitive car. It's a good looking car, well proportioned, but in this particular shade of red here, I think it kind of accentuates the dimensions. Whereas I remember going to Retroreveal a month or two ago in Paris, and they had a silver example on their stand, and actually I think it looked much better in silver than it did in more traditional MG red.
There you are, early buying tips for the MG Simister, which launches later this year to the market, doesn't it, I think? And if you're going to get one, David Simister's idea is get it in silver. But I want to take you quickly around the back of it, because there is one design piece that really jars with me, and it's the arrow indicators and tail lights at the back. For me, it just feels...
I like that.
You like that?
Yeah, do you know what? I think, why not have a bit of a design flair? In the, what's it, is it the current Mini Cooper has those Union Jack style tail lights? I think it's fun. Why wouldn't you have that?
I'll be a complete pedant. It's the only Union Jack that it's C.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm torn on them. I think it's a bit much, but otherwise it's not a bad looking car. The problem is they parked it next to a red MGB, and it really does sort of emphasise the size difference. But we'll leave you to make your own mind up on it, and also the question as to whether it will be a future classic still hangs heavy over the MG brand. We're wandering up into, which hall are we into now? Hall 4. And I'll ask you a quick question, David. There's a huge thing about this show is the fact that it's clubs working on cars, and why do you think that adds to the appeal?
Absolutely, this is one of the few places at any show in the country where you can see not only the cars but actually enthusiasts working on them. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to, my big job on Friday, the opening day of the show, is going around and judging the National Car Club Awards, and part of that is having a look at what the various clubs are actually doing about messing with their cars, the welding, the angle grinding. Actually, not welding, I don't think they're allowed to do that in here. But certainly, bolting things on and taking things off, and there's a lot of effort goes into that work. And there are some clubs that I'm really looking forward to seeing. So in previous years, the Jarrett Car Club have, they've always put on a really good stand where they're doing different things with cars. The Corsair Club, their Greasy Geezer's Garage, as they call it, that's always been a big draw for me. There is a club that deals with Polish classic cars, and they always do a superb job messing around with their cars, getting them up and running again. And everybody who works on these cars, they're so enthusiastic, and never have I gone have they said, we're busy working on a car. They're always happy to stop and talk you through what they're doing. And that's so important, because if you're thinking about restoring a car, it's really important that they talk you through what's involved in doing that work.
It opens up the show to something a lot more dynamic than it would otherwise be, and it is a great way to learn more about the car that you own or a car you're looking to own, especially if it comes to restoring, fixing, maintaining. It can be from the smallest and most mundane of jobs to the biggest things of body-off restorations. And I think both of our eyes have just been caught by the Volvo Enthusiast stand, have they not?
Absolutely, there's quite a few really interesting exhibits here, including the biggest. I've got to admit, we are Classic Car Weekly rather than Classic Lorry Weekly, but there is a tractor unit here which looks absolutely stonking, so I would encourage you. It's got Continental Services written across the front. You can't miss it. Come and have a look at it, because that's really cool. Second up, we've got the one of the cars that was used in the Saint. It's got a lovely cutout of the late great Roger Moore stood next to it. I know this is Kevin Price of the Volvo Enthusiast Club, really enthusiastic guy. Come and talk to him. He will talk to you till the cows come home about why that car is special. And there's another Volvo here as well, which is actually going to be in next week's Classic Car Weekly. This is a Volvo 240 Estate, and when you look at it initially, you might think, well, actually, I don't know, you might walk past it, you might not think it's much special, but this particular Volvo estate has done 832,000 miles. That's further, I believe, than the moon and back. So, it's an incredible achievement, and it just shows actually all that. It's they could have gone out and had the carbon impact of buying 3 or 4 brand new cars in that time, but no, what they've done is they've kept this car on the road. They've recycled, they've made do and mend, and it's all the better for it. It's a really cool car, and I would encourage you to come over, have a look at it, and find out from the guys who own it how have they done it.
It is a remarkable story. I will say I've had the privilege of riding passenger in this car, and it completely belies the mileage it's on, and you can either pop along to it at the show, or if not, pick up the next copy of Classic Car Weekly and read about it, because, well, it is a genuinely heartwarming story about this car. Okay, we're currently actually outside. We're outside Hall 4 because we've come to have a look at the barn find display, and, well, the car we found is very barn findy indeed. David, we don't know a lot about this car yet. We haven't seen any details, but there's not a lot to it.
Yeah, it's a Triumph Stag. It's certainly a work in progress, to say the least. This is, I think this is mimosa yellow by the look of it. But this is, what makes barn find so fascinating. You can see clearly the sills are very far gone. It's going to need a hell of a lot of work to get this back up and running. But the thing I would love to know is not so much commenting on the car's condition, but what the story is behind this. This looks like it's been off the road for a very long time, and even better if there is an owner who says yes, it's going to be back on the road this time next year. I would love to know more about it.
If it's back for this time next year, that'll be a feat hitherto unknown to man, because they've had to actually lift the roof off to steer the car, such is the condition of the rest of it. But it really is a testament to the amazing intrigue that barn finds trigger. And certainly, in fact, this one seems to have come with most of the barns still attached. There is actually plant life growing through the front scuttle. So definitely worth heading over and having a look at the barn find collection, because there are some absolutely beautiful cars there on top of that rather rotty Triumph Stag. We're back inside and still having a poke around the barn find collection. I'm stood next to an SS2, so something that predates Jaguar, and, well, it comes with a fake chicken stood inside it, which gives you a really good idea as to quite the effect they're going for with the barn find collection. There are hay bales all around us and rust falling off of everything in sight, but it is quite an evocative looking display.
Yes, I think there's a whole spread of different barn find cars in this Scotland James barn find display this year. I think the SS2 is by far and away the prettiest, even if it is filled with spare bits and a fake chicken. And there are some really interesting other cars actually. Just next to the SS2, there are not one but two very early Morris Minors, which have been off the road for a long time. And I know that the gentleman who owns one of them is looking to make that particular car into a replica of the Mosquito prototypes. These were the cars that prototypes that originally used in the development of the Morris Minor. So again, some very interesting sort of piece of motor heritage there. There's also a Lanchester on here as well, which I wouldn't put your hand too close to it because there's lots of very sharp serrated edges. But again, it just shows you. I mean, again, these cars have been off the road for many, many years. And the great thing with the barn find display is actually a lot of these cars end up getting restored after the show, so you see them again a few years down the line in their fully restored glory.
Hopefully when you see them a few years down the line you won't need a tetanus shot for getting too close, but there are some fantastic and very unusual cars scattered amongst it. So again, if you're heading through Hall 4, make your way over to the one which is surrounded by hay bales and have a good inspection there. We've moved on to the final of the halls. We're into Hall 3 now, and it's a little bit quieter down here, he says, as someone tries to start up an Alfa Romeo behind him. Ooh, fruity. More importantly though, there is a 1969 Morris 1800 Land Crab in front of me, Danube Blue. What's special about this, David?
So we are currently on the historic Marathon Rally Group stand. So these guys do a fantastic job of preserving cars that are associated with, as the name suggests, historic rallies. And this particular one is the press car for the London to Mexico rally back in 1970. So this car actually was quite well known. It appeared on Blue Peter in periods, along with various other programmes and in the press as well. And it's here in what looks like sort of certainly a partially restored state. I'm very intrigued to find out when the stand is up and running tomorrow, what the plan is with this car, because again it's a really fascinating piece of land crab history, and I really want to know more about why it's here, why it's got these two strange attachments on the roof as well, which I haven't seen before, and to find out more about what they're going to do with it.
They look like the spare wheel mounts from the back end of my MG, so I'd hazard a guess that's possibly what they're for, but we'll find out more in later detail as the show warms up tomorrow. So we get to the final part of the halls as we sweep through them, and we're in front of the Classic Car auction, easy enough to say, and well, there is a simply vast array of cars making up this year's catalogue, and a huge variety making it as well. Is there anything that's already stood out to you, David?
Absolutely. This is Classic Car Auction's biggest sale so far. There's always been an auction at the show. It's a very big part of it. I remember the very first one back in 2014, which is very barn find and project focused. That's really expanded over the years. So you've got a mixture now of projects and restored cars. And this one is the biggest, I'd say the biggest in the history of the show. More than 200 classic cars here. And I was just, even if you're not thinking about having a flutter, I would definitely come in here, get a copy of the catalogue because it's admission only. You can get two people in for a tenner. I think it's well worth doing because it's such a big part of the show. And there are some absolutely fantastic cars in here. There's a collection of 17 Range Rovers that have all come from the same source. And that includes, right in the corner, well worth having a look right at the end, it's a 6-wheel Range Rover fire tender. And what's interesting about that, not only the conversion to the fire tender, which incidentally was not an aftermarket job, this was something that Land Rover themselves were involved in, but it is chassis number 2. It has a YVB number plate, which makes it one of the very earliest. It's a pre-production Range Rover dating back to the 1960s. This is, top of the hill stuff in terms of Range Rovers. It's completely unrestored. It's no reserve. I am dying to know what it goes for this weekend. Yeah, so another one of my favourites here is the 1975 Rover 3500S. You can't miss it because it's an ex-police car. It's got the classic jam sandwich livery associated with Lord Mountbatten, and it's so pucker. It's really good condition. Clearly had a lot spent on it. It's one of the nicest examples I've seen, presses all the right buttons for me, and actually I think for a Rover P6 V8 with such provenance, I think actually it's not massively overpriced either. The estimate is 15 to 20 grand, which might seem high for a P6, but actually for an ex-police example with such a famous name associated with it, actually I wouldn't be surprised if actually it goes for a little bit more.
It is certainly one to keep an eye on. There is so many cars around here that we can say keep an eye on them, because there are so many special cars that keep getting pulled out of the woodwork for this. And I think that's testament to the work that CCA put in when it comes to building a catalogue. I mean, we've gone swivel-eyed with lunacy trying to spot everything in here, and David spotted something else that is equally as important and interesting.
So this particular Land Rover here, there are quite a lot of Land Rovers in this particular sale, partly because of the collection of Range Rovers that I've already mentioned. But there's one in particular here. It's a 1988 Land Rover 90, and the reason why this is interesting is because it's electric. We don't see many electric classic cars going through auctions at this stage, and the conversation certainly I've had with people in the trade is that at the moment they cost a lot of money to do the work on them. I know that this particular Land Rover has had, I think it's upwards of £40,000 spent on the conversion. And while obviously, yeah, potentially it's buttons to run if you charge it overnight on a cheap rate, the estimate on this particular Land Rover is 20 to 25,000, which, yeah, that puts it in the same kind of ballpark as other Defenders and 80s Land Rovers, you know, in similar condition. But that means if you've bought that car, you're potentially dropping quite a lot of money. So it's either, you know, it shows that the market just isn't there, you know, for electric conversions yet, certainly not in a way that can sustain the cost of conversions. But the other way you could look at it is actually, if you're thinking, it's a very, you know, divisive subject, converting classics to electric, but if you're going to take the plunge, this has already had all that expenditure spent on it. It's a very cheap car.
It is a very cheap car. It's very cheap for what is a fairly sort of average condition Defender 90. And like you said, someone's already spent 40 grand on making this electric. You can pick it up for half that price, and you've got all of a sudden a very economical to run Defender. Obviously, you don't necessarily buy Defenders because they're economical to run, and Lord knows you don't buy them for comfort. But for practicality and to be ahead of the curve when it comes to electric cars, this is a very interesting insight, and one to, again, keep an eye on, because it tells a story for electric converted classics to come. One of the huge parts of the Resto Show is the barn-find nature, the restoring of cars, as we've already mentioned. And as we've already hinted at, the auction is no different. And we've stumbled across three very interesting cars that are awaiting restoration or a little bit of recommissioning. And David, why don't you start off with the brace of Jensens?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I'm going to up that number, just as you were saying, to 5, actually. So even just where we're standing here in the middle of the classic car auctions, sort of assembled lots. Yeah, there's a Ferrari 400 here, which clearly has been off the road for a long time. These two Jensens, there is a 1968 FF. This is a very early Mark 1 example. Partially restored projects. Again, this is clearly going to need a lot of work doing to it, but that's 18 to 22,000. Right next to it is its two-wheel drive cousin. This is an Interceptor 3. 10 to 12,000 pounds if you're feeling brave enough. And then we have a couple more around the corner as well. So let's just move around there. Good Mini. So this is a 1275 GT. 1275 GTs have form at this particular sale as well. There was, I remember another unrestored example that came here last year. The estimate was 10 to 12,000 pounds. It really fired the market up, and it actually went for £38,250, which is more than triple its upper estimate, which really shows that actually, if you get the right project here and it's got the right background to it, it can go for all sorts of astonishing sums, even in a market which is maybe not as hot as it was a couple of years ago. This particular example, so this is something that's actually, yeah, there's the A-pillars need a bit of work. Clearly the paint is a bit tired, and you can see that, in the usual mini rot spots, you can see there's a couple of bits of surface rust and it needs a bit of attention. It's missing a panel by one of the front wheels, but actually it's not. I've certainly seen worse minis, and this one is a one owner from new car. It's yours for the estimate is £7,000 to £9,000. So I suspect it probably will. It's a 1275 GT. It's a car that has got a lot of traction in today's market. So I think it probably will. It will find a taker, I think. Right next to it, there's a couple of E-types as well, and the one that's really grabbing my attention is this is a Series 3 Coupe. This is the V12 model, of course, and again, this one has been sat in a garage for a long time. It's again looks pretty complete. It's it's got everything you'd look for. It's got obviously, because it's a barn fight, it's got a lovely helping of dust, of course, and the estimate on this one is £20,000 to £25,000. Again, I'd be very interested to see what it sells for.
That's a lot of car for that money, and it's described actually more as a garage find, given its really good condition for a barn find, and the very strong helping of dust is really accentuated with what look like cat paw prints across the bonnet as well, so really lending to the big cat provenance there.
So again, we're in another corner of the classic car auctions area, and Jesse and I have been captivated by two cars that are next to each other. They could not be more different. So on the left-hand side, we have a Lancia Monte Carlo. Tell me all about this. Why has this got your attention?
I love Lancias of the 70s. I love all the weird sort of Italian stuff coming through that period. And the Beta Monte Carlo Spider Series 1 is such a beautiful car. You've got those, you call them flying buttresses at the back, because obviously you've got the lovely sort of body line running down. It is just such a piece of evocative design, and you don't see cars like this anymore on the road. No modern car has this level of styling to it. It's just captivating, and surprisingly small as well for a sort of coupe-ish GT car. So absolutely fantastic, but at completely the opposite end of the classic car scale from 1938. David, this is something that immediately caught your eye as we rounded the corner.
I love this. This is a 1938 Morris 8 Series 2. This is one of the two-door saloons, and it's fabulous. It's the one thing I don't know about this is it's the estimate is £2,000 to £4,000, but it's been entered as a no reserve buy, so you could actually, in theory, take this home with you for actually considerably less than that. I don't know if it's a runner, but I think even if it isn't, I think this is actually, it's a really nice example. It's very complete, and the great thing with it, you could spend a small fortune on getting this all polished up, making it look lovely, but actually the fit and finish to this, it's got a lovely patina to it that's it's just so endearing. Everything is in there. We opened the door before. The smell as you pop your head inside, it's wonderful. It takes you back. And pre-war cars, actually, they offer so much metal for the money. People love them, and there is actually a really quite a thriving scene supporting them as well. So I think if I had the Reddies, this was certainly one I'd be sticking my hand up for.
I mean, we had Fuzz in the paper a couple of weeks back talking about the love for that sort of era of pre-war cars, and this really encapsulates it. And the smell is something special indeed. It's one of those things that classic cars, they get you in all senses, and this is a perfect example of that. Though a relatively humble saloon car, it is just as evocative as the no reserve £7,000 to £9,000 Monte Carlo sat next to it. So dealer's choice really as to what we want to pick and walk away from this show with. We're surrounded by Range Rovers as well, this rather lovely looking sort of bronze Vogue with a slightly less good for wear tyre on pretty much all corners, so it's a bit saggy, but otherwise a lot of Range Rover love down here. So while we're surrounded by Range Rovers, we've got the six-wheel drive fire tender down there, a very early Overfinch one there in a very nice eggshell white, but there's this very nice blue one that's caught your attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's two right towards the end, which are, again, quite significant pieces of Range Rover history. If you like your Range Rovers, and goodness knows I do, these are cars that you really should check out while you're at the show. One of them is a Monteverdi. So Monteverdi, a Swiss company, some of you may remember that they made supercars in Switzerland back in the 60s and 70s. But another thing that they did as well was, for many years, Land Rover would only sell you a Range Rover as a two-door. This was the four-door version was only introduced in 1981. This particular version was a conversion. They would take the two-door Range Rover, convert it into a four-door, and ironically, they actually used the same Morris Marina door handles that Land Rover did themselves with the later conversion. If we're being really anarchy as well, if we actually look at the back door, this is proper Range Rover geeky stuff here, you'll see that the door is still a little bit of bodywork here for the wheel arch. On the production versions, they went all the way down and the whole door would pull away. There is another Range Rover next to it as well, which is again another significant piece of Range Rover history. There's a white car, this is Lot 305, and this is an Overfinch. Overfinch, as some of you will know, are hotted up Range Rovers. They use the 5.7 litre Corvette engine, but this version is the prototype. This was the one that the company found to use. It appeared in a lot of the factory literature at the time. Again, really significant piece of Range Rover history. All those Overfinch Range Rovers that you see tootling around Cheshire and Knightsbridge today, this is the car that started it all.
This is very much the progenitor of sort of the modern Chelsea tractor, and I think we've got certainly two very interesting aspects when it comes to modifying Range Rovers. And I know my eye's caught by the Overfinch, and you're definitely a Monteverdi fan, and there's plenty more Range Rovers if you like something a little more standard besides, including Mike Tyson's Range Rover, which is nowhere near standard, but does have a lot of space in the back. Okay, we're getting to our final car that we're really going to sort of focus on in the auction lot, and that's to say there's still a hell of a lot more we could do. But Lot 383, David, why does this one stand out?
This is a 1997 Vauxhall Calibra, and there are plenty of Vauxhall Calibras out there even now, but this one is special because this is a turbo 4x4 limited edition, leather lined inside. They're all finished off in black. They only made 51 of them, so it's got a certain unicorn quality to it, and this particular one is being estimated at £15,000 to £20,000. Now, if this Calibra sells for even its lower estimate, that will be easily a price record for the Vauxhall Calibra, and will show actually that, what kind of market interest there is in these very good looking, very aerodynamic modern classic Vauxhalls. And it reminds me actually what happened sort of 10-15 years ago with do you remember the Ford Capri 280, the Brooklands? For years I remember those were actually, they weren't worth much more than the regular 2.8 injection Capris, and then they suddenly shot up out of nowhere and they brought the rest of the fast Ford market up with them. This is a really interesting car, and again I'm fascinated to see what it goes for on the day.
So this could be the sort of the weather vane we use for what happens with fast and hot Vauxhalls in years to come. And it's worrying that 1997, we're calling that a classic. That puts me firmly into that range as well, without giving away my age. But I have to say you're very correct on the Calibra being quite a handsome looking car. It's well proportioned and quite sleek. I do quite like that era of Vauxhalls. So perfect point in which to end this preliminary peruse of the restoration show, unless there's anything else you'd like to add.
Only to say that if you haven't thought about coming along already, make sure you come along. It's a fascinating insight into the world of classics, and particularly the joys of restoring them, buying them, mending them, joining up with clubs. There's so much here to see. There are thousands of cars here. I think you could quite happily, if you wanted to, spend all 3 days if you wanted to look around them in lots of detail. But the show opens at 10 o'clock on Friday. Well worth having a look, and we'll be here throughout the weekend. So if you see us, come and say hello with Classic Car Weekly.
Yeah, there's obviously, even if you can't make it on a Friday, you can get weekend tickets as well, so head along for Saturday and Sunday. There is a lot to get round, so we'd recommend making the most of your time and picking up the latest issue of Classic Car Weekly, which does have a show guide in it, so be sure to do that before you head along. If not, we'll hopefully see you here, if not, with our next issue, which will be out on the 27th of March. Correct? Correct. Thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.